My fiancé betrayed me with my own mother just days before our wedding, and my response left everyone stunned. I'm Ava, 28 years old, standing at the altar of St. Mary's Cathedral in a breathtaking wedding dress. 200 guests surround me, clueless about what's coming. The white silk clings to me, heavy, while stained glass windows splash colors across the marble floor. My bouquet of white roses shakes in my hands, not from wedding jitters but because my world collapsed 24 hours ago. My father stands beside me, his arm in mine, his face steady and supportive. He's the only one who knows the truth. In the front row, my mother sits, poised in her navy blue dress, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief, playing the proud mother perfectly. My fiancé fidgets with his tie, flashing the smile that once melted my heart. Now it sickens me. The organ hums as guests murmur, admiring the white lilies my mother picked, her favorite, mentioned in her diary alongside secrets about them. I graduated summa cum laude from Columbia with an English literature degree. I'm a senior editor at Morrison and Associates Publishing, a top Manhattan firm. I built a life I loved, a meaningful career, cherished relationships, or so I thought. My father, Pastor Williams, is admired for his honesty and wisdom, a value he instilled in me. My fiancé hails from the wealthy Blackwell family, with connections that shine in wedding announcements. 3 years ago, he proposed during a Swan Lake intermission at Lincoln Center. The spotlight glowed as he knelt with a 3-carat ring, and our section watched in awe. Felt like a fairy tale, the moment I'd dreamed of as a girl. Wedding planning kicked off right away. My mother dove into every detail with an intensity one should have questioned. She chose the venue, flowers, menu, even my dress. When I suggested changes, her eyes turned desperate, saying, "Sweetheart, I know what's best." I thought she was just an overzealous mom. Now I know she was planning a wedding to watch her lover marry her daughter. Processional starts, and I step down the aisle. My footsteps echo, 200 eyes on me. Some guests wave, others tear up, thinking they're seeing a love story unfold. They're wrong. Tucked in my bouquet are pages from my mother's diary, the proof that broke me yesterday. They detail her affair with my fiancé, their lies, their plans to keep it going after today. I'm not the naive girl who believed in perfect love anymore. I'm a woman who learned the people I trusted most could betray me deeply. The only way to take back my dignity is to refuse their lies. With each step, the wedding march carries me closer to revealing who I truly am. 3 months ago, I thought my life was set. I woke up in my cozy Upper West Side apartment, walked to Morrison and Associates to edit future bestsellers, and planned my dream wedding with the man I thought was my soulmate. My routine was simple: coffee at 7, a scan of industry news, then a subway ride to my office, diving into stories about other people's lives. I focused on contemporary fiction, especially family and relationship dramas. The irony stings now. I caught every flaw in novels but missed them in my own life. My fiancé worked at Sterling Martinez and Associates, a top Manhattan law firm handling corporate mergers with a 6-figure salary. Funded our magazine-worthy wedding plans. We'd been together 3 years, living apart but spending most nights together, dreaming of a house in Connecticut post-wedding. His proposal was a dream come true. During Swan Lake's second intermission, he said he was grabbing champagne. Instead, a spotlight hit our box seats and he knelt with a ring that sparkled like a star. The audience watched as I said yes, tears falling. Even now, that moment feels painfully perfect. My mother cried harder than me that night. She hugged him so tightly I laughed, teasing that she acted like the one getting engaged. She insisted on celebrating at her favorite downtown restaurant, with its candlelit tables and a wine list she knew by heart. She ordered a bottle pricier than most rents, saying nothing was too good for her future son-in-law. Wedding planning took over our lives. Weekends were packed with dress fittings, cake tastings, venue tours, and florist meetings. My mother made herself the boss, crafting spreadsheets and timelines like a corporate planner. She had an opinion on everything: my dress's shade, the roses in my bouquet. When I suggested my father's church instead of her chosen cathedral, she panicked. Sweetheart, the cathedral's acoustics are better and it's so photogenic. It's your special day. Her conviction always won me over just to avoid conflict. My fiancé barely cared about our wedding plans. When I asked his thoughts on table setups or menu options, he'd just shrug and say, "Whatever you and your mom want." I thought he was being sweet, letting us handle the girly details. Now I know he was letting my mother design their dream wedding. Work was my escape from the wedding madness. Morrison and Associates, I felt strong and valued. My boss praised my editing skills and authors asked for me by name. I was carving out something just for me, away from being someone's daughter or fiancé. But the wedding crept in even there. My mother called daily with urgent questions. Baby's breath or eucalyptus for the centerpieces? What about your fiancé's family's food allergies? Everything needed an answer right away. Looking back, I should have wondered why my mother knew so much about my fiancé's family, why she had his cousin's number memorized, why she always picked his favorite wine when we dined out. The first hint something was off came one Thursday evening in early spring, 2 months before the wedding. I stopped by my mother's house to drop off the caterer's guest list and saw my fiancé's car in her driveway. In the kitchen, they stood too close, sipping wine and chuckling over a private joke. My mother's cheeks glowed, her eyes sparkling in a way I hadn't seen since my parents' marriage started fading years ago. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, stepping back fast. "We're just sorting out the seating chart. Your fiancé had great ideas for his work friends." He flashed his charming smile and kissed my cheek. "Your mom's got an eye for detail. You're lucky she's so dedicated to your big day." Their eyes locked in a silent exchange before she hurried to the fridge. "Let me grab you some wine, honey. Your fiancé chose this bottle from that upstate vineyard. He said you'd love it." The wine was perfect, from a small vineyard I'd raved about on a trip 6 months ago. I never told my mother about it. I barely recalled mentioning it myself. "How'd you know about that place?" I asked him. He glanced at my mother before answering. "You brought it up, remember? Last month, talking about honeymoon spots." I didn't recall that chat, but the wedding blur made me think I'd forgotten. That was my first mistake, trusting instead of digging deeper. As the wedding neared, odd moments piled up. I'd call my mother and hear a man's laugh in the background. She'd say it was my father watching TV, but he was usually at church, working on sermons or meeting parishioners. One Saturday afternoon, I dropped by her house unannounced to borrow her fancy serving dishes for a dinner party. She was in the living room, looking unlike herself, hair messy, lipstick smeared, wearing a silk robe at 3 p.m. "Ava, I wasn't expecting you," she said, clutching her robe tighter. "I called 20 minutes ago," I said, puzzled. "You told me to come by." "Did I? Oh, right, I was napping." Wedding planning's exhausting. But the coffee table held 2 used wine glasses, and the air carried a whiff of pricey cologne, not my father's usual aftershave. One glass had my mother's lipstick mark, the other didn't. "Having company?" I asked lightly. "No, just me enjoying a quiet day," she said, grabbing the glasses with shaky hands. I helped her gather the dishes, but the whole scene felt wrong. My mother was hiding something, and I couldn't figure out what she'd keep from me. 2 weeks later, I was at lunch with my fiancé when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and gave a warm smile, the kind I thought he saved for me. "Work?" I asked. "Just your mom confirming tomorrow's photographer meeting," he said, flipping his phone face down. But I'd talked to the photographer that morning. We'd rescheduled for next week. When I pointed this out, he froze, then said, "Oh, she meant the backup photographer. You know how thorough she is." We'd never mentioned a backup. 3 weeks before the wedding, I decided to surprise my mother with her favorite Greek takeout to thank her for her wedding efforts. I let myself in with my key, calling, "Mom, I brought lunch." Silence. The house felt off, with a hint of expensive cologne in the air. A charcoal gray suit jacket, not my father's style but my fiancé's kind for big meetings, hung over a dining room chair. In the kitchen, my mother was scrambling to clean up, her hair tousled, blouse wrinkled, looking startled. Ava, what are you doing here? She asked, almost panicked. I brought lunch, I said, eyeing the scene. 2 warm coffee cups in the sink, 2 plates with brunch crumbs, a half-empty wine bottle, and 2 glasses. Thought you'd be hungry, I added, setting the bag down. Expecting someone? No, just me, she said too quickly. Just tidying up from breakfast. You know I hate dirty dishes. But the table was set for 2 with her special china, used only for big occasions. A fresh red rose lay on a placemat, perfect and bright. The newspaper was open to the art section. My mother never read it, but my fiancé always checked it for show reviews. Whose jacket's that in the dining room? I asked directly. She paled. Oh, that's your father's. He left it this morning before church. But my father was across town at a wedding rehearsal. I'd helped with his notes the night before. That jacket was too sleek, too costly for his simple taste and pastor's budget. I should go, she said fast, moving toward the jacket. Florist appointment in an hour. Downtown traffic's a mess. She was lying. The florist meeting was tomorrow, noted in my planner. I stayed 20 minutes, watching her fidget, glance at the clock, and jump at passing cars. Her forced chatter felt fake. When I left, she locked the door behind me, something she never did during the day. That night at dinner, I mentioned the jacket to my father. Jacket? He asked, confused. What jacket? The gray one in the dining room today, I said. Mom said it was yours. They shared a strange look. My mother jumped up to clear full plates. Oh, that jacket, my father said slowly. Borrowed it from a church friend for wedding photos. Wanted to look modern, but my father never cared about trends and that jacket wouldn't fit his frame. Over the next few days, I noticed things I'd missed. My mother's face glowing when my fiancé called, her knowing his schedule better than I did, her new, sultry perfume replacing her usual floral scent. When I told my fiancé my mother seemed stressed, he jumped in. I could stop by, help with vendor calls, he said. She's working hard and my schedule's open. I thought he was being kind. I didn't know he was eager to see his lover. A week after the jacket incident, my fiancé changed. We'd been glued together for 3 years, sharing everything, work gripes, silly jokes. Suddenly, he was distant, cagey, not himself. Started one Tuesday when I showed up at his place with Thai takeout. I let myself in with my key, calling his name. He'd usually rush to greet me, ask about my day, help set the table. Instead, he was in his bedroom, door shut, whispering on the phone. When my fiancé finally came out of his bedroom after 20 minutes, he looked shocked to see me. How long have you been here? He asked. About 20 minutes. I brought dinner, I said, pointing to the Thai takeout on his table. I'm not hungry. I might be getting sick, he replied, his face flushed. Not like he was ill, but like he'd been caught. I stepped closer to check his forehead, as I'd done many times before. He backed away fast. Don't want you catching this, he said. Maybe go home tonight. In 3 years, he'd never pushed me away when he felt unwell. He usually wanted me to stay and care for him. I offered to make tea or grab medicine, but he insisted he needed rest. As I grabbed my things, I spotted a wine glass on his counter with burgundy lipstick marks, not my light shades. Whose is that? I asked. He shrugged. Probably the cleaning lady's. She was here earlier. But his 60-year-old cleaner wore no makeup and wouldn't drink on the job. The next evening, I called him at 7, our usual time. It went to voicemail. An hour later, he picked up, sounding out of breath. Sorry, I was at the gym, phone in the locker, he said. Which gym? I asked lightly. Your usual one closes at 6 on Wednesdays. He paused. Tried that new downtown spot with later hours. But I knew that gym shut down months ago. I'd read it in a work journal. Friday, I decided to surprise him at his office with coffee and pastries. His assistant said he'd left early for a personal appointment. When I called, he answered after several rings. "Where are you?" I asked. "I swung by your office. Running an errand for my mom," he said. "Family stuff." But his mom lived in Florida and her errands were usually phone calls. I suggested an early dinner since he was out. "I'm way uptown," he declined. Rain check. Later, I drove by his place. His car was in the garage. No uptown errand. The worst moment came 3 days later. I showed up at his apartment Saturday morning with bagels and the paper, hoping for a cozy morning. It was eerily quiet. I called his name, no answer. His bedroom door was shut, unusual for him. I knocked softly, heard rustling, but no response. When he finally opened the door, he was in a towel, blocking the room. "Just got out of the shower," he mumbled, avoiding my eyes. "Can I come in?" "I brought breakfast," I said. "I'm sick again." "Need some space," he replied. For the first time in 3 years, he kept me out of his bedroom. I tried stepping past to put my purse on his dresser, like always. He blocked me. "I'm contagious," he insisted. "Don't want you sick." I left, hurt and confused. The man I was set to marry was acting like I was a stranger, and I couldn't understand why. 2 days before the wedding, I went to my mother's house to pick up documents for my dad: the marriage license, our rings, and our family's 3-generation Bible. It was meant to be quick: grab them and head to the church rehearsal. My mother wasn't home, but I had a key and knew the safe's location behind a childhood painting in her bedroom. As I knelt by the safe, a leather journal on her nightstand caught my eye, next to her glasses and water. It looked expensive, like a romantic gift, not a drugstore buy. I shouldn't have touched it, but curiosity won. I opened it, knowing it was wrong, telling myself I just wondered about her new journaling habit. The first entry, dated 3 months ago, matched when my fiancé's odd behavior started. March 15th. "He brought me white tulips today, my favorite, without me saying so." We talked for hours: literature, life, dreams we've kept secret. I feel alive after years of sleepwalking. My mother's neat handwriting chilled me. The flowers, the deep talks, the timing, it pointed to something unthinkable. I turned to the next page. March 22nd. Guilt's tearing me apart, but I can't stop thinking about him. His kiss today made me feel alive after 20 years of a stale marriage. We know it's wrong, but we can't stop. He says he's never felt this with anyone, that Ava's love is comfortable, not passionate. I should push him away, but I'm selfish. I want to feel desired. The journal slipped from my hands, horror sinking in. My mother was sleeping with my fiancé, the man I'd marry in 2 days. Shaking, I read on, each entry worse. April 5th. We made love in my bed while Ava worked and her dad was at church. He held me, wishing he'd met me first. I should be ashamed, but it felt so right. April 18th. Ava showed me her dress photos today, so happy, so trusting. I wanted to confess, but how could I ruin her life for my joy? He says we'll continue after the wedding. Marriages of convenience are normal in his world. I hate myself for wanting it. May 10th. We're planning how to keep this going post-wedding. He'll visit for family dinners, holidays, repairs. Ava won't suspect because she trusts us blindly. Sometimes I think she's too trusting. Each entry coldly listed their meetings, lies to me, and plans to keep deceiving me while I prepared to marry him, clueless. My mother wrote of their passion, unlike anything she'd felt with my dad, and how my trust made their betrayal easy. The last entry was from yesterday. June 20th, tomorrow's the wedding. He came over this morning for our last time before the ceremony. We cried, clinging like teenagers before college. He swore we'd resume after the honeymoon. I feel like I'm at Ava's funeral, not her wedding. But I can't let him go. I won't. I sat on my mother's floor, surrounded by proof of their cruel betrayal. My fiancé wasn't just cheating, he was doing it with my mother. She wasn't just breaking her marriage, she was shattering her daughter's life. They'd schemed to keep their affair going after my wedding, writing it all down in her handwriting. The man I loved and the woman who raised me had made me the unaware pawn in their twisted love story. I left my mother's house, gripping her journal, and drove to the downtown Marriott. I checked in under my maiden name. My apartment was full of memories of our shared dreams, so I couldn't go there. I wasn't ready to face my father either, not until I knew what to say. I needed space to think, to plan, to face the worst betrayal of my life. In the hotel room, I sat on the bed and read the journal 3 more times. My mother's words were clear, precise, like she was writing history. Dates, places, their secret talks, their intimate moments. It was all there, painfully vivid. I wanted to call them, scream, demand answers. But in that quiet room, my shock turned sharp and clear. They'd planned this betrayal carefully, writing it down, scheming to deceive me after the wedding. This wasn't a mistake, it was a deliberate plot. They deserved a deliberate response. All night I planned. I made lists, studied the evidence, weighed every outcome. By morning, I had a plan. I called work to take a personal day, then went to a print shop to copy the journal's worst pages, proof of their affair and plans to continue it. I sealed the copies in an envelope and locked them in the hotel safe for safekeeping. Next, I called the photographer with a special request. I wanted a reception slideshow with family photos and messages from absent loved ones. He loved the idea and set up the projector. I spent hours building it, mixing real photos and kind notes with images of my mother's journal pages, just enough to show everyone at the wedding who they were really cheering for. Then I called my father, not to spill the truth that needed to be face to face, but to ask him to meet me at the hotel that evening to talk about the ceremony. When he arrived, I handed him the journal. His face shifted from confusion to disbelief to heartbreak as he read about his wife's betrayal. In 10 minutes, he looked a decade older, his shoulders heavy with pain. "How long have you known?" he asked softly. "Since yesterday, when I got the marriage documents." We sat quietly for a few minutes. Then he asked, "What do you want to do?" "I want to expose them in front of everyone who thinks they're good people," I said. My father, who'd preached forgiveness for 30 years, nodded. "They chose this," he said. "Let them face the consequences." We planned the reveal all evening. He'd lead the ceremony as usual until the vows. Then, instead of promises, I'd speak to the guests directly. "Are you sure?" he asked before leaving. "There's no one doing this. They made that choice when they betrayed us," I replied. "I'm done being their victim." That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. For the first time since finding the journal, I felt in control. Tomorrow, I'd face 200 people and tell the real truth, not their lies, but the raw truth. No quiet retreat or tearful private talk for me. Their betrayal was bold and public. My response would match it. Wedding morning, I woke at 6, clear-headed and calm. No jitters, no doubts about my dress or hair, just steady resolve to follow through. I ordered room service, fruit, yogurt, coffee, and ate slowly, reviewing my 3-minute speech. It was sharp, factual, and short enough to finish before anyone could stop me. 9, my bridesmaids arrived, 3 college friends thrilled for what they thought was my happiest day. I smiled and chatted as they helped with my dress, makeup, and the updo my mother had chosen. "You're glowing," my maid of honor said, clasping my grandmother's pearl necklace around my neck. So calm for a big day. She was right, I was at peace with what was coming. The photographer arrived at 10 for pre-ceremony photos. I posed for classic shots, slipping on shoes, holding my bouquet, gazing out the window. They looked like a bride's joyful moments, but they captured my battle prep. At 11:30, my father came to take me to the cathedral. Seeing me in my dress, his calm wavered. "You don't have to do this," he said, holding my hands. "We can cancel, say you're sick." No one would judge. "I have to," I said, fixing his tie. They planned their betrayal. I'm planning my truth. In the limo to the cathedral, I hid the journal pages in my bouquet, tied with ribbon, my something old, new, borrowed, blue, and true. The cathedral was my mother's vision: white lilies, flickering candles, soft music filling the air. 200 guests in fine clothes buzzed with excitement for the ceremony they expected. From the vestibule, I watched my mother take her front row seat in our chosen navy dress, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, the perfect proud mother. My fiancé stood at the altar in his sharp tux, adjusting his cufflinks, nervous. He looked like the ideal groom: handsome, successful, well-bred. The guests probably thought he was anxious about marriage. They didn't know he'd already committed to someone else. 5 minutes, the wedding coordinator whispered, a pro who'd run countless ceremonies here. Ready. I checked the mirror. The woman staring back was stunning, composed, unstoppable. My dress, makeup, hair, all perfect. I looked like a bride ready for a dream wedding. Instead, I was ready to give 200 people a story they'd never forget. I'm ready, I told her. My father offered his arm, his face serious but supportive. He'd prepped all morning for this moment. Last chance to back out, he said as the music signaled the processional. I've never been surer, I replied. The doors swung open, and 200 faces turned to me, beaming with joy for what they thought was a love story. My mother played her part, handkerchief to her eyes. My fiancé smiled, the charming grin that once felt like magic. I stepped down the aisle, my father steady beside me. The journal pages in my bouquet felt heavy, the proof that would shatter everyone's illusions, including mine until yesterday. The wedding march swelled around me, its familiar notes echoing off the high vaulted ceilings of St. Mary's Cathedral. I glided past rows of guests, their faces lit with warm smiles, some dabbing at their eyes with tissues as if witnessing the pinnacle of romance. One woman, an aunt from my father's side, whispered to her husband, her voice carrying just enough for me to catch, "She looks like a princess." Others raised their phones, snapping photos to freeze what they believed was a moment of pure, unadulterated joy, a bride stepping into her happily ever after. Little did they know this wasn't the fairy tale they imagined. In mere minutes, it would transform into something raw and unforgiving, not a wedding but a reckoning, not a celebration of love but the stark exposure of betrayal, not the dawn of a marriage but the decisive end of a web of lies that had ensnared me for months. With every step, the marble floor felt cool and unyielding beneath my satin heels, a stark contrast to the heat rising in my chest. The air was thick with the scent of white lilies, my mother's choice, of course, mingling with the faint perfume of the guests' colognes and the polished wood of the pews. I forced a serene smile, nodding subtly at familiar faces, colleagues from Morrison and Associates, old friends from Columbia, distant relatives who'd flown in from across the country. Their eyes sparkled with envy and delight, projecting their own dreams onto me. Inside, my mind raced, replaying the journal entries I'd memorized overnight. How could I have missed the signs? The late nights, the secretive glances. But now, armed with the truth, I wasn't trembling from fear. It was resolve, pure and sharp, that steadied my bouquet. Nearing the altar, I locked eyes with my fiancé, Thomas. His gaze held what looked like genuine affection, his dark eyes softening as they traced my veil and gown. He stood tall in his tailored tuxedo, the picture of composure, as if the weight of his secrets didn't burden him at all. How had he convinced himself this was okay? Marrying me while plotting stolen moments with my own mother, did he see it as some twisted form of love, a way to have his cake and eat it too? My stomach twisted, but I held his stare, letting him see the steel in mine. In 30 seconds, his carefully built facade would shatter like glass under a hammer. I reached the altar, the music fading into a hush, and took my place beside him. He leaned in, his breath warm against my ear, whispering, "You're absolutely beautiful." The words carried a warmth that once would have melted me, but now they rang hollow, as if he'd locked away his betrayal in a compartment of his mind, separate from this sacred space. My father cleared his throat and began the ceremony with his trademark grace, his voice resonating through the cathedral like it had in countless sermons. "Dearly beloved," he intoned, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls in holy matrimony." Not a tremor betrayed him. His steady tone masked the storm we both knew was brewing. Congregations settled into their seats, a collective sigh of contentment rippling through the air. I glanced at my mother in the front row, her navy blue dress impeccable, her smile radiant as she embodied maternal pride. Across the aisle, Thomas's family beamed, the Blackwells with their old money poise, nodding approvingly at their son's choice of bride. Everyone was in character, playing their roles in this elaborate charade. The doting parents, the excited friends, the envious onlookers. If only they knew the script had been rewritten. My father proceeded through the opening prayers and readings, his words infused with the authority earned from 30 years behind the pulpit. He spoke of love's enduring power, of commitment's sacred bond, each phrase landing like a quiet indictment. When he reached the section on the sanctity of marriage, the importance of honesty between spouses, his eyes flicked to mine, a subtle signal only I could read. My heart pounded, but not with panic. It was the thrill of impending justice. It was time. Now, he said, his voice deepening with solemnity, before we proceed with the vows, Ava has something she would like to share with all of you. A soft murmur swept through the congregation like a breeze rustling leaves. This deviation from tradition caught them off guard. Whispers of confusion, a few raised eyebrows. Guests straightened in their seats, leaning forward with curiosity, perhaps expecting a heartfelt poem or a tribute to grandparents long gone. I turned slowly to face them, my bouquet firm in my grasp, the hidden pages within it a secret weapon. 200 faces stared back, a sea of anticipation mixed with mild bewilderment. They thought this was a sweet interlude in an otherwise predictable ceremony. How wrong they were. Thank you all for being here today, I started, my voice projecting clearly through the cathedral's flawless acoustics, honed from years of public readings at work. I know many of you traveled long distances to celebrate what you believed would be the happiest day of my life. I paused deliberately, letting the past tense hang in the air like a warning. A few guests exchanged puzzled glances, their smiles faltering as they sensed the shift in my tone, from bridal bliss to something edged with steel. Unfortunately, I continued, my words measured, I discovered something 2 days ago that changes everything. I reached into my bouquet, fingers steady as I withdrew the folded journal pages, unfolding them with deliberate care. My mother has been keeping a detailed record of her 3-month affair with my fiancé. The silence that crashed down was absolute, a vacuum sucking the air from the room, no coughs to break it, no rustle of programs, not even the faint shift of bodies in seats. 200 people sat frozen, their expressions morphing from confusion to wide-eyed shock as my words sank in. My fiancé's face drained of color, going ghostly white, then flushing crimson, then paling again in rapid succession. Ava, what are you doing? He whispered urgently, his voice cracking with desperation. I ignored him completely, my focus on the truth, and began reading directly from my mother's journal, her elegant script now a damning confession. March 15th, he brought me flowers today. White tulips, my favorite, though I never told him that. We talked for hours about literature, about life, about dreams we've never shared with anyone else. My mother half rose from her seat, her face contorting into a mask of pure horror, eyes wide with pleading terror. Ava, stop this immediately, she hissed, her voice a mix of command and panic. But I pressed on, my voice gaining strength with every syllable, rising above the growing undercurrent of unease. April 5th, we made love in my bed today while Ava was at work and her father was at the church. Afterward, he held me and said he wished things were different, that he wished he'd met me first. Gasps erupted like fireworks throughout the cathedral, sharp and scattered. Guests twisted in their seats, craning necks to stare at my mother and Thomas, their faces a kaleidoscope of emotions, shock widening eyes, disgust curling lips, fascination drawing them closer despite themselves. Thomas grabbed my arm, his grip tight with urgency. You're making a mistake. Let me explain, he pleaded, his charming facade cracking under the pressure. I yanked away, unflinching, and read the final entry, my tone unwavering. June 20th, tomorrow is the wedding. We both cried afterward, holding each other like teenagers. He promised that after a respectable honeymoon period, we'd find a way to be together again. I feel like I'm attending my daughter's funeral instead of her wedding. The cathedral exploded into chaos, a tidal wave of noise crashing over the once serene space. People leaped to their feet, shouting in disbelief. Phones were whipped out, cameras rolling to capture the unfolding scandal. Thomas's mother let out a piercing scream. "This is impossible," her hands clutching her chest as if struck. My mother's friends gaped at her in horror, their loyalty fracturing as she collapsed back into the pew, racked with sobs that echoed unnaturally loud against the stone walls. "They plan to continue their affair throughout my marriage," I announced over the din, my voice cutting through like a blade. This journal, written in my mother's own handwriting, documents every lie they told me, every deception they schemed, every selfish choice they made over my well-being. I set the pages down on the altar with a finality that felt like slamming a door, then turned to face Thomas directly. His eyes darted, panicked, as the weight of exposure bore down. "Did you really think I was too stupid to figure it out eventually?" I asked, my words laced with quiet fury. "Too trusting to notice the signs? Too weak to do anything about it?" He opened his mouth, stammering, but no coherent words emerged. He stood there, a man witnessing his empire of deceit implode in real time, his shoulders slumping under the collective gaze of judgment. I pivoted back to the congregation one last time, the room's tumult settling into a tense, horrified hush as they hung on my next words. "I want everyone here to understand something," I said, projecting my voice to every shadowed corner of the cathedral. "I could have handled this privately. I could have quietly called off the wedding, let them save face, protected their reputations from the fallout." The air thickened with anticipation. But they chose to document their betrayal in black and white. They chose to plan a future of continued deception, stringing me along like a fool. They chose to make me an unknowing participant in their sick, twisted game. With that, I descended the altar steps, my wedding dress trailing behind me like a queen's regal train, whispering against the marble with each purposeful stride. "So I chose to respond publicly," I declared. "Everyone who thought they were celebrating a beautiful love story deserves to know they were actually enabling a cruel deception." My mother's voice broke through the murmurs, trembling and desperate. "Ava, please. I can explain everything. You don't understand." I cut her off sharply without breaking step. "I understand perfectly. I understand that you betrayed your daughter, your marriage, and every value you claim to uphold. I understand that he betrayed our relationship, his promises to me, and the trust of everyone who believed in him. Most importantly, I understand that I deserve better than both of you." I turned to my father then, who had observed the entire unraveling with the quiet dignity of a man who'd preached integrity his whole life. "Thank you for supporting me today," I said softly, my voice catching just a fraction. "It means everything to me." He nodded, his eyes brimming with a mix of pride in my strength and sorrow for the pain we'd all endured. With that, I continued walking back down the aisle, my head held high, chin lifted in defiance as I passed the 200 stunned guests. Some reached out tentatively, murmuring words of support. "You're so brave, Ava," or "We're here for you," their touches light on my arm. Others remained seated, mouths agape in shocked silence, processing the bombshell. But most had already succumbed to the digital age's impulse, pulling out their phones to film, their screens glowing as they captured the spectacle, no doubt already composing captions for social media shares. Behind me, my fiancé's voice echoed desperately through the nave. "Ava, wait. We can work this out. I made a mistake, but I love you." The words hung pathetic in the air, a last-ditch plea from a man exposed. I didn't turn, didn't slow my stride, my heels clicking steadily toward the exit. "You don't love me," I called back without glancing over my shoulder, my tone final and unyielding. "You love the idea of having us both, but that was never your choice to make." As I reached the back of the cathedral, the doors looming like a gateway to freedom, the voices behind me detonated into full pandemonium, arguments flaring like sparks, accusations flying across the aisles, shocked conversations bubbling up as people chose sides in the heat of the moment. My mother's sobs reverberated off the stone walls, raw and guttural, a sound I'd never forget. Thomas was apparently cornered, trying to stammer explanations to his family, their voices rising in a chorus of anger and disgust. How could you? And you've shamed us all. The once sacred space now felt like a courtroom in disarray, judgments being passed in whispers and shouts. Stepping outside, the afternoon sun hit me like a warm embrace, brilliant and unfiltered, chasing away the shadows of the cathedral's interior. I paused on the stone steps, drawing in deep breaths of fresh air scented with city blooms and distant traffic. For the first time in months, a weight lifted from my shoulders, leaving me feeling lighter, almost buoyant. The betrayal that had crushed me 48 hours ago now fueled my liberation. Chaos soon spilled out the doors, guests streaming onto the steps in waves, some rushing to my side with offers of support, hugs, and murmured assurances, others hanging back, clearly more interested in gossiping among themselves or texting the news to absent friends. My best friend from college, Sarah, pushed through the crowd first, her eyes wide with concern. Ava, oh my God, are you okay? That was insane. Where are you going to go now? I met her gaze steadily, a genuine smile breaking through for the first time that day. I'm going to be fine, I told her, and I meant every word. I'm going to be better than fine. Within hours, as I slipped away to a quiet hotel to decompress, the story exploded across social media like wildfire. Videos of my revelation, grainy phone footage capturing the gasps, the readings, the fallout, were shared thousands of times. Hashtags like hashtag wedding betrayal and hashtag Ava's truth trending by evening. My mother's meticulously built reputation as the devoted pastor's wife crumbled overnight, whispers in our community turning to outright condemnation. Thomas's law firm fielded calls from clients and partners questioning his character and judgment, the scandal staining his professional life. What they had thought was a hidden affair, tucked away in stolen moments, became a public spectacle that dogged them everywhere. Grocery stores, social circles, even online forums dissecting every detail. That wedding, intended as the launch of my so-called perfect life, instead marked the pivotal moment where I chose to value myself above everyone else's comfort and facades. In the ruins of their deception, I discovered a profound lesson. Sometimes the most loving act toward yourself is refusing to play the victim in someone else's selfish narrative. For the first time in my adult years, I was utterly free to explore who I truly was, unburdened by the need to please or perform for those who had never deserved my devotion. 6 months later, I had rebuilt my world in a sunny apartment in Portland, Oregon, a full 2,000 miles from the wreckage of my former life in Manhattan. The move wasn't just geographical, it was a complete reset. I'd landed a senior editor position at Evergreen Press, a small but prestigious publishing house specializing in contemporary women's fiction, narratives brimming with themes of resilience, personal transformation, and unearthing strength in the most unexpected corners. My days were now filled with manuscripts that mirrored my own journey. Heroines facing heartbreak, rising from ashes and claiming their power. It was cathartic, editing these stories, seeing echoes of my pain turned into triumphs on the page. My new life embraced simplicity, and it satisfied me deeply in ways my old one never had. I worked with passionate authors who crafted tales of complex women navigating tough decisions, much like I had. For the first time since college, I lived alone, and I relished it. The quiet mornings with coffee by the window, the evenings lost in books without interruption. My apartment was my sanctuary, large windows flooding the space with natural light, gleaming hardwood floors that creaked just right underfoot, and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves crammed with volumes I'd collected over years. I'd furnished it entirely to my taste: soft earth tones, minimalist decor, a cozy reading nook with a plush armchair, no unsolicited advice from family or a partner presuming to know what would make me happy. It was mine, through and through. Those first 3 months in Portland hadn't been easy, though. The story of my wedding day revelation haunted me online, popping up in viral clips and Reddit threads, making casual dating feel like a minefield and job interviews awkward as potential employers side-eyed my notoriety. I'd catch strangers glancing twice at coffee shops, whispering, "Is that the bride from the video?" Stung, that unwanted fame, turning my private pain into public entertainment. But gradually, as the internet's attention span waned, people stopped recognizing me as that wedding video woman. I could finally build a reputation grounded in my professional skills, My sharp editorial eye, my ability to spot narrative gold, rather than the scandal that had defined me briefly. My father visited twice during those months, and each time he arrived looking more vibrant, more at peace than I'd seen him in years. The lines of stress that had etched his face during his marriage had softened, replaced by a quiet contentment. He'd filed for divorce from my mother just a week after the wedding, citing irreconcilable differences and the profound betrayal of their marital vows. Process wrapped up 4 months later, cleanly if not painlessly. Since then, he'd begun seeing a kind widow from his congregation, a woman named Eleanor who appreciated his unwavering integrity rather than manipulating it for her own ends. Over coffee at my favorite riverside shop during his second visit, he confided in me with a rare vulnerability. "I should thank you, Ava," he said, stirring his mug thoughtfully. "You gave me permission to face the truth I'd buried for so long, that my marriage had been making me miserable for years. I was so fixated on the notion that good Christians endure everything, push through no matter the cost, that I never stopped to ask if I deserved happiness too." My mother, on the other hand, had attempted contact exactly 3 times in those 6 months, each effort a painful reminder of her role in the mess. The first came 2 weeks after the wedding, a 10-page letter delivered to my old address, forwarded to Portland, brimming with justifications, flimsy excuses, and pleas for forgiveness that reeked more of her own guilt than any genuine concern for my healing. She wrote of moments of weakness and uncontrollable passion, as if that excused the calculated deceit. I read it once, my hand shaking with a mix of anger and pity, then crumpled it and threw it away, refusing to let her words burrow back into my heart. The second was a voicemail on my birthday, her voice thick with tears, begging me to call so she could explain everything properly. I listened to the first few seconds, hearing the familiar quiver that once would have pulled at my sympathies, then deleted it without finishing, blocking the number for good measure. The third arrived as a package, family photos and heirloom jewelry she thought I might want, accompanied by a short note acknowledging my anger but expressing hope that someday I'd forgive her. I sorted through it methodically, donating the jewelry to a local women's shelter, and kept only one photo, a snapshot of me and my father at my Columbia graduation, both of us beaming with unfiltered joy, my mother notably absent from the frame. It was the sole memento that didn't twist my gut with nausea, a pure reminder of the bonds that had survived. My former fiancé, Thomas, pursued me with far more frequency and desperation, his efforts escalating like a man clinging to a sinking ship. He bombarded me with calls and texts in the early weeks, showing up unannounced at my old Manhattan apartment before I moved, even enlisting mutual friends to act as messengers on his behalf. His communications followed a predictable arc, starting with profuse apologies laced with remorse, then shifting to explanations about how the affair just happened amid the stress of wedding planning, as if spontaneity absolved the months of lies. When silence met his pleas, anger crept in, accusations that I was overreacting, that I owed him a chance to make amends. Finally, bargaining took over, promises of therapy and change. His last message, a rambling email 4 months after the wedding, detailed his epiphany about the biggest mistake of his life, swearing he'd cut ties with my mother immediately after the reveal and was deep in counseling to unpack his betrayal. I read it all, letting the words wash over me without stirring emotion, then blocked his email without a reply. He didn't deserve my forgiveness, my rage, or even my attention. In my new life, he deserved only to be forgotten, a chapter closed. The most unexpected gift of this fresh start was how little I missed either of them, or the life I'd left behind. I'd braced for waves of sadness, loneliness, or lingering anger to consume my days. Instead, relief flooded in, washing away the debris. The subtle anxiety that had shadowed my engagement, the endless self-doubt of, am I good enough? Smart enough? Interesting enough to keep him? Vanished like mist in the morning sun. I no longer performed the exhausting role of the perfect daughter, bending to my mother's whims, or the ideal fiancé, molding myself to Thomas's expectations. Now I was simply Ava, free to explore my desires without external input or approval, charting a course that felt authentically mine. A full year after that fateful non-wedding, I found myself standing before an audience of 300 women at the Portland Convention Center, delivering a keynote speech titled "Choosing Truth Over Comfort," Why Self-Respect is Never Selfish. The invitation had arrived unexpectedly, sparked by an essay I'd published in a national women's magazine about spotting betrayal and reclaiming agency. A prominent women's leadership organization reached out, eager for a speaker who could address making gut-wrenching choices amid personal crises. As I stepped to the podium, the room hushed, expectant faces turning toward me, women from all walks of life, each carrying their own scars. A year ago, I began, my voice steady and confident, amplified through the speakers. I thought my life was perfect. A thriving career, a stunning wedding on the horizon, and a family I believed had my back. The audience leaned in, captivated. But beneath it all, my fiancé was entangled in an affair with my mother, and I was too trusting, too invested in the illusion to see the cracks. Silence enveloped the room, every eye locked on me as they absorbed the raw honesty. When I uncovered their betrayal just 2 days before the wedding, I faced a fork in the road. I could handle it behind closed doors, quietly, preserving their reputations and the fragile peace of our family. Or I could embrace honesty in its messiest, most painful form, public exposure that forced everyone, including myself, to confront the ugly reality. I paused, scanning the sea of faces, young professionals nodding in recognition, older women with knowing smiles, all united by their own battles. I chose truth, I declared, and it became the most liberating decision of my life. Over the next 45 minutes, I delved deep into the lessons forged from that day, exploring self-respect as the bedrock of empowerment, distinguishing true kindness from enabling toxic behavior, and the raw courage required to disappoint those who never prioritized your well-being. I shared anecdotes from my recovery, the small victories of solo evenings, the thrill of professional autonomy, the peace in setting unbreakable boundaries. The response was electric, a thunderous standing ovation that echoed through the hall, followed by a long line of women eager to share their parallel stories, tales of choosing difficult truths over the comfort of silence. After the event, I drove home under a twilight sky, the city lights twinkling like stars. Pulling into my apartment, I felt a profound sense of contentment. This space I'd crafted entirely on my own terms, free from compromises or committee approvals. No one dictated my decor or routines. It was a haven of authenticity. My plants thrived in the sunny corners because I'd chosen varieties I adored. My bookshelves organized in a system that made sense only to me, my fridge stocked with foods that matched my tastes, not someone else's preferences. I'd ventured back into dating 3 months prior, approaching it with caution and selectivity, establishing clear boundaries from the start. The man I was seeing, a thoughtful literature professor at Portland State University, celebrated my independence, never once implying I was too intense or demanding for owning my worth. Our conversations flowed naturally, rooted in mutual respect, a far cry from the imbalances of my past. Professionally, my career had blossomed in ways unimaginable when I'd been tethered to Thomas's schedule and my mother's expectations. Freed from those constraints, I'd earned 2 promotions in quick succession, my editorial instincts sharper than ever. Now, I was seriously contemplating launching my own literary consulting business, a venture that would let me guide emerging authors while maintaining the flexibility I cherished. Alongside that, I'd begun writing a book, not a bitter memoir wallowing in victimhood, but a practical, empowering guide for women navigating similar betrayals, packed with tools for reclaiming control and building resilience. My relationship with my father had deepened into something unbreakable, our shared trauma forging an even stronger alliance. He'd remarried 6 months ago to the widow from his congregation, a gentle soul whose quiet strength complemented his own. Witnessing their simple, genuine happiness brought me joy I'd never anticipated. He called me the morning after his wedding, his voice warm over the line. "I'm so proud of the courage you showed that day, Ava. It wasn't just your stand. It gave me the permission I needed to do the same, to step out of the shadows and into a life worth living." As for my mother and former fiancé, updates trickled in occasionally through mutual acquaintances, fragments of lives I'd left behind. Their affair, so intoxicating in secrecy, fizzled out after just 3 weeks under the glare of public scrutiny, reality proving far less appealing than their clandestine fantasy. My mother had relocated to Florida, seeking refuge near her sister, unable to withstand the social fallout in our hometown where whispers followed her every step. Thomas had resigned from his prestigious law firm and fled to Chicago, ostensibly for a fresh start, but more likely to outrun the tarnished reputation that clung to him like a shadow. Neither had managed to reconstruct the worlds they demolished in their pursuit of selfish thrills, their choices leaving them isolated in the debris. I harbored no satisfaction in their downfalls, nor any lingering sympathy. They had faded to irrelevance in my narrative the instant I prioritized my own worth over their comfort. That evening, as I sat in my apartment surrounded by beloved books and self-made plans, the truth crystallized. My revenge had never been about their destruction. It was about my refusal to be destroyed, about emerging from the ashes unscathed and empowered. This life, free, authentic, wholly mine, was the ultimate triumph. In it, I'd uncovered depths of strength, intrigue, and capability I'd never glimpsed while striving for perfection to please the unworthy. The woman who'd stood at that altar a year ago, shattered by betrayal, had evolved into someone unbreakable, someone who would never again settle for less than she deserved. And that metamorphosis? It outshone any illusion of a lie-built marriage, proving infinitely more valuable. I heard bits about my mother and ex through others. Their affair lasted 3 weeks post-reveal. Reality wasn't as sweet as their fantasy. My mother fled to Florida, unable to face her ruined reputation. My ex left his law firm for Chicago, likely running from his shame. Neither rebuilt what they broke chasing selfish desires. I felt no joy or pity for them. They became irrelevant when I chose myself. In my apartment, surrounded by my books and plans, I saw my revenge wasn't their ruin, it was my refusal to be ruined. My revenge was this life, free, real mine. I found I was stronger, more fascinating, more capable than I knew when I tried to please those who didn't deserve me. The woman at that altar, broken by betrayal, became someone who'd never settle for less than she deserved. That change was worth more than any marriage built on lies.